My name is Beth Michelle, and I'm a Senior Associate Dean in the Admissions Office. And of course, we are all here to welcome you to the celebration of Native American and Indigenous graduates on behalf of the Native American and Indigenous Studies Initiative, which is an ad hoc committee here at Emory University. We are so proud of our graduating seniors, and this is going to be a special evening to celebrate them. As we begin, I'd like to share a poem written by a Thana-Authon poet named Iliyah Zepeda. When she develops a poem, she starts with the facts, and her poem is titled, Carrying Our Words. We travel carrying our words. We arrive at the ocean. With our words, we are able to speak of the sounds of thunderous waves. We speak of how majestic it is, of the ocean power that gives us songs. We sing of our respect and call it our relative. Taking a note from Zepeda, I'll start with a fact myself. Our graduates have been phenomenal community contributors since they stepped on campus. Many of us have known them since Spring Essence when you joined us in 2019, and it's been wonderful to see your beautiful journey here at Emory University. Sierra and Iliyah, I look forward to hearing your songs and continuing to watch you be good relatives. And now I welcome Dean Ladin from the Office of Admission.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor for me to be here and to be a part of this. Thank you all for being here. As Beth mentioned, I'm John Ladin, Dean of Admission here. I work within the Office of the Provost. I have a few remarks and an introduction to make. As we can see some evidence of that on the screen here. But I do have some remarks. Before getting started with that, I just want to thank members of the Emory community who have been really supportive of NACI, of this initiative that Beth mentioned. Vice Provost Henderson is here. She has been of great support. Reverend McGonigal is here. We have just many examples, actually some great examples on the back of the program for you. And those of us involved in this initiative over the years have really been thankful for that. So. Well, we are here today to celebrate, and especially the graduation from Emory of two students who've been really involved in this initiative. And they are Sierra Talavera-Brown, who's a citizen of the Navajo Nation, and Iliyah Bruffett from the White Earth Nation. And Emory wants to say that it is proud of you and to say well done and to celebrate your graduation from the university. We also want to welcome Christy, Iliyah's mother, is here, and darling Sierra's mother. Special welcome to you, and thank you for being here. So why does one go to college? This sounds like I'm gearing up for a very long thing, and I'm not. I promise I'm not. But it's one of the things when I speak to prospective students, I remind them that one goes to college to change, not to stay the same. So to change, like to learn new methods, to learn about new perspectives on the world, take time to reflect, to approach issues and challenges of life in new ways. So those are some changes. But at one's core, despite all these kind of changes that are happening, I do think there's the person, the person at the center of it. And that person is durable, and that identity maybe shouldn't change. that's something that should stay the same, carry on through. And so these are things like what do you value? What is important? Why do you do things? What community do you come from? And what community are you a part of? And so Iliyah and Sierra, in your cases, so I have a little bit of a window onto this as the Dean of Admission. I got to know you before you came to Emory. And I took a look at my notes. The things that we learned about you before you came. Sierra, if it's okay, I want to start with you. We learned that you had a goal to always grow. You believed that the key to growing as an individual was education. And that education would allow you to empower other people, and to create personal connections and improve the world. And you said that everyone, you thought everyone had value, and that everyone deserved to be engaged with in more than just superficial ways. And you showed us that those were your values and the ways that you spent your time in high school. You noticed other people and you were helping other people. We saw many examples of that in your application. And Iliyah, we learned about you too. We learned about your interest in working with people who were likely to be overlooked. You mentioned overlooked in healthcare especially. And you mentioned some examples of populations, young people, undocumented mothers, and Indigenous people. And you said that your main time commitment in high school was the student government, because you thought it had a really positive effect on the community that you were a part of at school. And so, because we noticed these things about you both, and we were very excited, and because you were great students, we admitted you to join this community. And then, as Beth noted, after you were admitted, we invited you to Essence, this program for admitted students to come to campus, and you both came to that, and we met you in person at that time. And then, thankfully, you chose Emory as your university. And we're here today because of that, and so proud of that. And your years here have continued to show those values that we learned about right from the very beginning, in the applications that you submitted. And Sierra, you have been consistently involved with NASI, and you've been the backbone of support for Native students here during your time. And Iliyah, you have been involved in the initiative, but also with Black Student Union. You've been a mentor to students and an awesome leader here at the university. You've both been involved in kind of more specific things, and it's a long list of things, but you continue to show, to do what you said was important to you as we got to know you, and that's to support other people and to make your communities better. So we are thankful here at Emory for that, and again, just feeling so pleased and happy that you have been here and left your imprint on the community. Just well done, and congratulations to you both. Today this is the first time that we've done this. It will be, I'm sure, a long tradition. It's established going many, many years into the future. So this is just the first day of that. And Iliyah and Sierra, at this event, your students still for a few more hours, but we hope that you'll continue to remain a part of the community and come to this event and be a part of it, still as a member of the community, always going forward and into the future. So. And let me just, again, I want to thank everybody for being here. I do have one more thing to say to Iliyah and Sierra. I've said a few times, I just want to say again how proud we are of what you've accomplished. And we know that you're ready to move into new spaces and to be a vital member of the communities that you find in the future. It's clear when you came to Emory, you didn't forget about where you come from. And I just want to say, and I hope you won't forget about Emory as you move on into the communities of the future. Remember that we're here and continue to be part of the community. So, congratulations, Sierra. And, everybody join me in that round of applause. So part two of my task, and really I'm just so pleased to do it, to welcome Craig Womack back to campus. Craig taught Native American Studies in the United States, in Canada for decades, for 3 decades. He spent 15 years right here at Emory University, and recently retired up to Middle Tennessee, where he's a musician now and active in the Nashville Jazz Workshop. His ceremonial affiliation is with Iliyah Ceremonial Arts. Dr. Womack has done a lot of writing, some books, Red on Red and Drowning in Fire, and articles, other books. He has directed a documentary film, Hearing the Call, The Cultural and Spiritual Journey of Rosemary McCombs Maxey. It's really fantastic, and Craig, you were the one that people wanted to have to be their keynote speaker for this event. And I do want to say one more thing about Craig Womack. We were kind of joking about. I was excited to be able to say this, and then you started talking about it a few minutes ago. But so some of you already know what I'm going to say. But you know, there are 30,000 high schools in America. 30,000, more than 30,000. But Craig Womack and I went to the same high school. This little, you know, out of the way public high school in Martinez, California. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. I was so incredible when I discovered that. We discovered that at a gathering a few years ago, and it was really funny when we figured that out. So, in a very personal way, it's an honor to welcome Craig Womack up, and thanks so much for that.
Thank you, Dean Laddie. And in a way, I mean, it's such an Indian story, because I was talking to these guys about growing up away from home and everything, and my mom and dad moved away from eastern Oklahoma when they were pretty young, moved to the Bay Area. Both my granddads had been working in the oil fields in Oklahoma. They ended up becoming pipe fitters for Standard Oil. So I grew up in this little oil refinery town in the East Bay, Martinez. So I'm talking to John, and I don't know even how we got on this subject, but he said, well, yeah, I went to high school in the Bay Area. I said, really? Where at? East Bay Area. I said, the East Bay Area? What high school did you go to? He says, Alhambra High School. and I couldn't believe it. But, you know, that says something about the Indian diaspora. I mean, it's the story of our lives, isn't it? I retired right at while the pandemic was in full force. And I got that infamous email that we all got that said, it's spring break, but you're not coming back from spring break. We don't know how long it will be. And it ended up being a considerable long time. So walking across this quad over to Cannon Chapel is the first time I've actually been back. But I have had contact with these two students that we're honoring today. And in the case of Sierra, what sticks out in my mind is we were both asked to speak at this fancy schmancy fundraising event at Emory. And we ended up in some very complex negotiations about what we were going to say, and in my case, for how long we were going to say it. And I have to say that Sarah and I think, did pretty good for ourselves in those negotiations. And in the case of Iliyah, that pre-visit to campus, we actually walked around the low water preserve. And I said, if you come on board here, this is like an oasis that you're not going to believe. It's like stepping off into another world. And when the proverbial doo-doo hits the fan, and you know you're in the midst of all this academic turmoil, this is just a treasure trove over there. You got to see this place so you know about it. So we walked around there, and also the thing, of course, I noticed about Iliyah is I retired, but I kept seeing her name, and I mean, she hit the ground running when she got on campus in terms of Native community building. So what I'm going to do today is just tell you some stories. It's what I do, what can I say? And I feel like I'm basically a story waiting to happen, in both the good sense of that and also probably the unsettling sense of it. But this first story I want to tell you, I heard from one of my academic mentors by the name of Leroy Littlebear. And Leroy was the founder of the Native Studies Department at the University of Lethbridge in the early 1960s, and it was unique because it was the only department of its kind that had full departmental status from its inception. So I taught up there a number of years, and Leroy was from the Blood Reserve, one of the Blackfoot reservations, and he would tell the story about the Blood tribe having a bundle stolen from it, a sacred religious object. This bundle ended up placed in a museum in Calgary. And the tribe negotiated for decades to get that bundle back. And they got it returned. And Leroy would say that the dilemma they faced was when that bundle came back to them, they no longer possessed the knowledge they needed to open and close the bundle. If I recall the details of this story correctly, that bundle required knowing something like 300 songs that went with these different objects in the bundle. Object is a problematic word here, but that's one we're using for shorthand. So Leroy would tell this story, and he would pose this question, and he would say, do you know how we got those songs back? And Leroy was a very effective storyteller. He let that hang in the air for a while. He said, we took that bundle to the right place. And what Leroy was saying, the way I understood it, was that there are certain holy places in Blackfoot geography that if you place yourself, these places are alive, they're animate, they have being, they have motion, they have intelligence, they have knowledge. If you place yourself in a right relationship with one of these places, there are possibilities for reciprocal exchange of knowledge. So if I was the kind of speechifier who typed up a fancy speech and gave it a title, I would call my remarks this afternoon, Taking Ourselves to the Right Place. How do we know when we've taken ourselves to the right place? Surely this has to be on your mind at this point, if you're graduating. I mean, it was on my mind, like, what's next? And now I'm an old guy and it's still on my mind. I finished up some major project and I think, what do I do with the rest of my life? So I want us to take that notion of taking ourselves to the right place. How do we take ourselves to the right place? Kind of put it on the back burner, keep it warm there, and that's the idea we're going to explore together this evening. I want to tell another story. Comes from the same location. Now I have to say that my years up in southern Alberta, in what they call Treaty 7 country, up there in Blackfoot country in the Old Man River Valley, those were formative years for me and for my husband as well. And this story I heard from a guy by the name of O.V. Mercredi. And O.V. was the Grand Chief, he had been the Grand Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, which is a national political lobbying body for Native rights in Canada. He had been the Grand Chief at critical junctures in Canadian history. One was during the Oka crisis, and equally importantly, he was Grand Chief during the constitutional talks when Canada was getting its new constitution. People were talking across the country about whether Native rights would be officially codified and written and enfranchised into the Constitution. So Ovid was around for a few days, and he was on campus, and he was giving some talks, and it was my job to shuttle him around. And I had this old beat-up blue Honda at the time, and it was kind of trashy. And Ovid would get in that car, and he'd say, "My God, this really is an Indian car." And he told the story about growing up in a Cree household, Canadian Cree household, whose first language was Cree. And in spite of being very traditional in those particular regards, there were certain aspects of Cree culture he didn't learn about. His family was devoutly Catholic. And as an adult, he decided that he wanted to learn some Cree songs and some Cree drumming and some singing. So he approached an elder, and he told him about this desire. The elder gave him a drum, and he said, "Come back, and we can have some instruction." So Ovid did. He came back with this drum, but they would just sort of sit there, and not much would happen, and this would occur again and again. And Ovid thought, what in the world is going on? But somehow he came to the recognition that what that old man was saying to him was, "Yeah, I can teach you some Cree songs. I mean, that's not a problem. But wouldn't the beginning place be whatever songs you already know? Whatever songs already compel you, wherever they might come from, whatever touches you or moves you, wouldn't that be the place you start?" And man, I have thought and thought about that story, because in that story, it seems to me, is the kernel, the rub, the essential dilemma of being a teacher. How do we get people to understand what it is they already know? So much of teaching ends up being trying to get people to say back to us what we want to hear. Here's the main points. Here's what we think is important information. Here's how I believe. But how do we identify what it is that they already have inside them and facilitate that? And if you know an easy way to do that, please tell me, because I've been trying to do that for 30 years, and I find it to be quite challenging. I remember having another conversation with one of my own relatives that kind of resonated with what Ovid was saying. I was visiting with June Ray Edwards, who was married to my grandmother's sister, my great uncle. We were in Eufaula, Oklahoma, at his house. And we were laughing about certain relatives of ours who get themselves in these scrapes and muddle their way through using knowledge that is imperfect, but still they manage to come out the other side. And at one point, June Ray turns to me and he says, "Craig, you might think that you don't know how to do something, but if you find yourself in a position where you have no other choice but to do that thing, guess what? You will discover that you know how to do it." So the first principle we're going to put out there in terms of taking ourselves to the right place is we go to that place where we don't have to go anywhere at all to get there. We turn inward and we ask ourselves, what is it that I already know? This is the problem with speaking so informally. What part of my speech? Amen. Okay, and I want to tell another story, and these stories are kind of chronological. This happened at the next place I worked at the University of Oklahoma. My family has deep roots in Oklahoma. I have deep roots at OU in as much as nobody in my family had ever been to college before, but I went to grad school there and then came back and was a professor there. So Norman and OU's a place I know my way around. And I found myself in a situation where I was talking to Edgar Heepenberg. This is a Cheyenne artist, kind of internationally known, sculpture, painter. And we had a Native graduate student who was under our supervision. And she was complaining, I guess she was saying this lament, and I don't know what to call it, but it's a speech that if you've been a Native student in a university, you've given it yourself. I know I've given a speech. There's all this institutional racism. They don't understand me. They don't get my culture. The thing's stacked against me. And this went on for quite some time. And Edgar said something to her that was surprising. He said, what you need to find is an idea. He's talking about research. He says, not any kind of an idea. It's an idea that's alive. It has force. It has motion. It causes you to be alive and to move and to do things. And he says, when you find that idea and you latch onto that idea, he says there is no kind of institutional racism that can prevail against that idea. And I've thought about this a lot too, and I guess putting it in my own terms, adding to Edgar's story, is sort of like surfing, you know. I mean, I've never surfed in my entire life, but that never kept me from talking about these types of subjects. You know, you're riding this big wave, and you might crash, and you might end up scraped up on the bottom of the ocean. That wave's still going to reach shore. It's not going to stop. And so that's what we climb aboard. And I thought about this story because I would go on to advise graduate students for many years after that. And you'd have this conversation, and with graduate students, all roads lead to not Rome, but to their dissertation. So it's like, what's your dissertation about? What are you writing about? And I cannot even tell you how many of this same conversation I had over and over again. What I would love to write about is this. But given the job market, what I'm going to write about is this other thing. And I said, whoa, wait, stop sign. And I tried to take them to this Edgar Hieberberg's principle. Why would you not write about that first thing that you told me about? So the next thing we're going to put on our exploration of taking ourselves to the right place is finding that kind of idea that has force and motion and movement and causes us to do things and to move. And if we're involved in an endeavor where we cannot find any hint of that idea anywhere, that's when we start to ask some questions about what we're doing and the direction that we're going. The next story I want to tell is a more Creek story. It's the kind of story that if you grew up in a certain kind of Creek family, you'd be quite likely to hear this story. To be honest, my grandparents and parents often talk about farming in eastern Oklahoma, and that seems to be at the center of their storytelling. But this is a story I heard from one of our elders, Linda Alexander, who was a member of Greenleaf Ceremonial Grounds, a shell shaker, taught lots of young women to shake shells, talented seamstress, sewed all kinds of traditional clothing, and the founder of the first native language instruction at the university level, at the University of Oklahoma. I was in that first class. And Linda would tell the story about a turtle. And he wasn't just any old turtle, but he was a really hungry turtle. Made so hungry he was getting weak knee if he would have had knees. And not feeling too swooped. And, you know, maybe you all, it's like 5 o'clock just before dinner, you might be feeling this way too for all I know. But this turtle looks off from the tree line, off from the edge of the woods, and he sees some women working off in the distance. And they're pounding corn, and they got that big old kajubby with that wooden paddle on the end, and they're pounding corn in a barrel. This would be like a charred out stump. And this turtle thinks, man, I bet you if I get over there to where them women are working like that, every now and again they'll slosh some of that corn over the side of that barrel. I can snatch me up some of that to eat. So he comes crawling out of the woods. You know how he is, kind of slow and plodding and persistent. Gets up to where those women are working, and sure enough, he's able to get some corn. Start to eat something. But those women are working. They're busy. He's all underfoot. If it's anything like what my mom and dad told me and my grandparents told me on one of those small subsistence farms in eastern Oklahoma, I mean, you just went from dusk until dawn, barely got your work done. So they're, shh, get out of here, turtle. Go away. Go back to the woods. We've got stuff to do, families to feed, cooking, food to make. But you know, He's just slow and plodding and persistent and stubborn and keeps crawling around that barrel and snatching up that corn. Well, one of those women got frustrated with him, tripping her up, so she takes him, he gives him just a little gentle toss into a grassy spot. Shh, go back into the woods. Get gone now. We got work to do. Well, you know how he is. Just stubborn like that. And he crawls back up there, and one of these women, an older woman, just can't take it anymore. She gets mad. She gets that kajubi, big wooden paddle. She winds up on it like she's going to bat in a World Series or something. And I mean, she lets loose and connects with Turtle. And Turtle thinks, I got to get out of here because she'll kill me. So he crawls back towards the woods, and this time he's not in too great a shape. His shell's busted up, inside's mashed, internal organs hurt. One of those little old turtle legs ain't working too good back there, and he's kind of going in circles instead of walking in a straight line. He gets up against a log at the edge of the woods, and he says, "Whew, I can't go any further. I'm just as bad as I can possibly be." And where I come from, we believe that sometimes when you're in that position where you have no more recourse, at the very bottom, a little song will come to you that's instructive. So that's what happens. Turtle starts singing, "Chado so, chado lele, chado so, chado lele, chado so, chado lele, chado so, chado lele." And as Turtle's singing, he can feel his shell come back together. As Turtle's singing, he can feel his insides on the mend starting to get better. As Turtle's singing, he looks at that little back turtle flipper, and it seems to be a little bit more mobile, like he can get around now and walk in a straight line. And as Turtle's singing, he's not perfect, but he's a whole lot better than he was before. And Turtle goes on to do a whole bunch of other things, and to be perfectly honest, this story has an X-rated component. If you invite me back again, I might tell you the X-rated part. We'll see. But suffice it to say, I told that story some time ago to some activists here in Atlanta. And these are activists who are doing a fantastic job opposing the construction of a place that's become known as Cop City on the south side of town, close to where I used to live, in East Atlanta Village. And they've been doing all kinds of research and community organizing, suggesting alternative uses of that space. They've done all kinds of things building community out there. But when I told this story, I think it was last December 3rd, one of the things that concerned me was that there was a fringe group out there that was pretty destructive. And I was worried about where all that was headed. And I'm still worried about it. And I told that story, and it was kind of a strange choice considering. But what I said to them after I told it was this. I said, what would happen if that turtle and those women were able to imagine themselves as relatives? Now, we don't want to over-romanticize this. Relatives can be oppressive, they can be mean, they can be cruel, they can be worse. But when we have a conceptual framework where we see the ways in which we're connected to other people, how does that change the way that we strategize? So I posed that question to them, and I was talking about these types of stories with a friend of mine who was mentioned during the introduction, Rosemary McCombs, friend of decades. And she was telling some of these stories to her grandsons. She was telling her grandson Dashiell a story about a wolf and a horse. And this wolf ends up throwing hot embers on this sleeping horse. And Dashiell says, "Wait, stop. I don't like that story." He says, "I want the wolf and the horse to be friends." And you know what Dashiell did? He took that story from his grandma and he retold it and made the wolf and the horse friends. here's the next point about taking ourselves to the right place. When we inherit narratives that are oppressive or that don't work for us or that don't move towards human liberation, we have the right and perhaps the responsibility to change those narratives for the better. The next story I've got to tell is not my story. It's you all's story. These two people that we're honoring today. And just to really get you to think and us to think together about the impressive stuff that you've already done here. And a moment ago I was speaking about complaints. And when you're in Native Studies leadership positions, you often have this complaint with your colleagues. We say there's two types of students. There's the box checkers, and then there's this much smaller group of students who do the actual work of Native community building on campus. These two students we're celebrating today are way over into category number 2 from the day they set foot on this campus. And John and Beth have both already mentioned this. And we look at Sierra, for example, a person already who's doing all this interesting work in relationship to chronic pain, giving papers on it, writing about it, going to meetings where people are discussing it. I might have to sit down and have a consultation about lower back pain from running and playing music hours a day. Sarah, who has made trips out to Oklahoma, to the Creek Nation, to Cherokee Nation, in hopes of building long-term sustainable relationships between these tribal communities and Emory, and also in relationship to her own research and wanting to see what tribes are doing in these health areas that she's interested in. Sierra is founder of the Native Student Group on campus, a contact point, a student liaison between the task force, where Emory's examining its past, its history of enslavement and disenfranchisement of African American people and overlooking Native people. And I have to put this in because I put it in for the last few years every time I speak, but the continuing enfranchisement of African American students in Atlanta. I have a dream too. My dream is this, is that someday students who grow up in African American neighborhoods in this city will be allowed to attend Emory. Not only allowed to attend Emory, but brought on and actively become a part of our classrooms. Sierra, in doing all this academic work, has also found time to be a volunteer. And I found this so moving. I read her resume, and she was a volunteer in reproductive justice issues for Sister Song, which is a regional Southern institution, and for Planned Parenthood. And okay, so we've all got our beliefs and political stances and so on, but this is mine, and I'm retired, so you can say crazy stuff. If you can think of something right now at this historical juncture that's more important than doing volunteer work for Planned Parenthood, I'd like to know what it is. This tells me something about this student. Iliyah, like I said, she hit the ground running, and she's a working student who's worked her way through college, held down management positions in Starbucks, and I have the utmost respect for this. I'm biased in these regards, but back when I went to college, at that time, tribal scholarships weren't available to me. I had to get myself through the same way, holding down jobs. I know what a Herculean effort that is. My hat's off to you. I really for that. And a person who's keenly understood the way in which Native community work is intricately tied to broader alliance building. This was mentioned as well. But her leadership in the Black Student Alliance on campus with African American women's groups attests to her understanding of this. And in relation to what I just said a moment ago, Iliyah has worked with city students on test preparation, on succeeding in science labs, on filling out college applications. And what this tells me about these two students is that they have an understanding that the work we do, our academic interest, is intricately tied to the place that we do that work, the geographical space, the location. That when you're working in Atlanta, even if you're only here for 4 years, that's tied to the city that you're in. I wish our administrators were in the place of these two young women. And Iliyah also has been a student contact for the task force on Untold Stories as well, like Sierra has been. When I look at these students, it's like the old Gershwin refrain. I don't know what else to say. Who could ask for anything more? That's what the song says. And, our next principle for taking ourselves to the right place, and I'm coming towards the conclusion of my marks here very quickly, is, just recognizing that all the things we've already done. If you want to get an understanding of this that goes beyond language, beyond words, after this, sometime tonight, listen to Mahalia Jackson sing How I Got Over. Listen to her sing it on the Capitol steps before Martin Luther King gave his speech. And you'll have a new understanding of taking stock of how far you've already come. The final story I'm going to tell is an extraordinary story for me. It's personal. It's about my brother, Mike. And he's incarcerated, serving a long prison term in Folsom Prison, California. And when he first landed in jail, he landed in the county jail during the middle of the pandemic. So he waited for 3 years for his case to go to trial. And when, the county jails during the pandemic across the United States were a disaster. But my brother tells about having this one unforgettable cellmate. And he was young, much younger than my brother. And he didn't speak any English. My brother doesn't speak any Spanish. But somehow they found a way to communicate with one another. And this young man, who was very good at arts and crafts, decides that my brother needs a pair of pajamas. I don't know how he came to that conclusion. Did he get just tired of looking at Mike in his underwear? What happened? I'm not sure. But check this out. This young man saves up T-shirts. He takes the T-shirts, he takes the bottom, he takes the T-shirt and uses the part where your arms go through to create the bottoms where you put your legs through. He collects and cuts out the crew line, neckline, to make a waistband for these pajamas. My brother tells me, in order to make the thread, he strips these T-shirts into thin strips that were about the diameter of yarn. To sew with, he uses a pencil and pushes the thread through and makes holes. And my brother says that by the time this kid got through, he had a by-God pair of pajamas to wear. Not only that, but they got little treats from the commissary. They have a teeny bit of money on their account to get candy bars or something. Comes in these paper bags. This kid saves up these paper bags, weaves them together, and makes a basket with compartments in it. So my brother can carry his shower stuff to the shower when it's time to take a shower. I'm listening to this, my jaw's dropped to the floor at this point. And here's a young man who somehow determined that my brother was worth expending all this energy on. And here's a young man who determined that he wasn't going to give up on my brother. And I'll be damned if I'm going to give up on him either. So the next principle, the last principle on taking ourselves to the right place, is we take ourselves to that place where we have so much love for ourselves and respect for ourselves and compassion for ourselves that pretty soon it can't be contained in the single vessel that is ourselves, but it starts to spill out and affect how we relate to other people. Now, you don't have to be perfect at this. If you had to be perfect at it, I would be the last person who could give this talk. But I remember I took a class. It was one of the best classes I ever took. I don't know why this isn't one of our GERs, but it was over at the CBCT, the Compassion Center. And I never can remember what the CBCT stands for, but they link meditation and compassion with scientific research. And the head of that institution is a guy by the name of Professor Neji. And so we're in class, and he was talking about some of the stuff I was just mentioning, how first we're going to try having feelings of respect and compassion and love for ourselves, and then we're going to try to extend it in a sort of gradated way to other people. First, people we didn't know, I think it was, and then, what was it? People we know but have neutral feelings about. People we like was early in the process, and then the last was people we don't like. So a student in class asked the inevitable question. He says, what about such and such? Do we have to have compassion for him? And he was talking about a politician. It would be redundant to even say his name. Everybody was talking about that person back then. What's the next egregious thing he's going to do? And Professor Neji says, I'll tell you what. He says, we're not going to start with anyone that hard. And I so appreciated the humanity and the warmth of that response. You don't have to be perfect at this. You just have to start it in some kind of way. So these are some things that were on my heart and mind about taking ourselves to the right place. This last place is this place of compassion where we have love and respect for ourselves to the extent that it starts to extend to other people. And I just want to say, Mado, thank you for your kind attention. I want to say Mado to Sierra, to Iliyah for giving Emory a chance, and just thank you so much. Mado.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Womack. That was amazing. I have no idea how I can follow that. But I got a text this morning from someone very important, and I'm sure many of you have received a text from this person as well, so please join me in solidarity. How many of you have received a text from Associate Dean Beth Michelle? Okay, and if you did you answer it? Yes. Okay, so that's why I'm here. I'm Deborah Vidali, faculty in the anthropology department. I'm one of the founding members of this initiative before it even had a name, going back about 7 years ago. And I got this text from Associate Dean Beth Michelle this morning asking me to stand here and officiate over this section of our ceremony today, which is the presentation of awards and graduation gifts. Now, if you're like me, you might also not just receive texts occasionally from Dean Michelle that you answer, but you might be under the impression that Associate Dean Beth Michelle can be in many places at the same time, doing miraculous things, right? And today, she thought she was going to be here officiating. She is going to be officiating, but there's 2 roles to play, so I got tapped for one of them, which is to basically be the narrator of our presentation. So it is with great pride that we honor our graduating seniors. Oh, by the way, yeah, being tapped to speak at 11 a.m., I also got the script from Associate Dean Beth Michelle, so I'm voicing that. So thank you for preparing me. It's with great pride that we honor our graduating seniors, Iliyah Bruffett and Sierra Talavera-Brown, with their graduation cords. The Native American Student Association, many of them in attendance here with us today, selected the cord with 4 colorways. The black, white, yellow, and red are colors symbolic of the medicine wheel and embody the concepts of the 4 directions: the east, the south, the west, and the north. We look forward to seeing the cords paired with your Emory cap and gown. It signifies your achievement and contributions to Emory University. So I'd like to welcome you both to the front, please. Christy is placing the cord on Iliyah. Beth will place the cord on Sierra. Lastly, the Macy Committee would like to gift each graduate with a blanket from the 8th generation company owned by the Snoqualmie tribe. Their signature wool blankets are the first native-owned business to sell authentic native design wool blankets on a commercial scale. It marketed a significant time for marked a significant time for Native artists to reclaim a market that had been dominated by non-Native companies. Sierra, we celebrate your knowledge, creativity, and outstanding accomplishments during your time at Emory University. Your service to the campus community has been invaluable. And if you Kate, class 24, and Trey Hart, class 25, presents Sierra with the tribute blanket. It was designed by the artist, Yara Yazi, who pays homage to his grandmother, traditional weaver. Iliyah, we celebrate your knowledge, creativity, and outstanding accomplishments during your time at Emory University. Your service to the campus community has been invaluable. Professor Lowry and Dean Beth Michelle are presenting Iliyah with a new day. It was designed by Anishinaabe Ojibwe artist Sarah Bagaton Howes, and it was inspired by the designs and colors of her store. Congratulations. Really emotional. I also have a second speech written that I get to read. And this is from class of 2019. Hello. This message is being delivered by a dear friend and mentor of mine, Dr. Vidale. The person who wrote this message has a name. It is Clement. I wanted to film a video of encouragement for you all, but have been in the process of overcoming a head cold. Frankly put, I presently sound like Squidward. I wish not to embarrass myself. That is why Dr. Vidale is delivering this message. Unfortunately, I do not have any words of wisdom to offer, as though I may be far enough removed from my Emory experience to speak at a graduation ceremony I am not an elder, and do not feel as though it is my place to offer up wisdom. That being said, I will share with you some small snippets of life advice given to me by some elders. None of these thoughts are my own. They have each been given to me at a pivotal point, a pivotal part of my life, and have changed the foundation of who I am as a person. So these are the 10 pieces of wisdom that Bruffett has offered, much shorter than the many stories we have with Dr. Womack, but possibly connected to several of those things. 1, work for your people, whether that be through a tribal government, research, a nonprofit, or through a creative outlet. Make sure what you are doing helps your people. 2, wake up when the sun comes out. 3, a res dog, do what a res dog has got to do. 4, pray for love, the land, and your ancestors. 5, nobody cares about what you say. They care about what you do. 6, marry your best friend, or do not marry at all. It really does not matter what you choose. Just love other people well. 7, if you do not like what somebody is texting you, just block them and move on. Unless it's deemed beneficial. 8, at the end of the day, you have to live with you. 9, everybody dies. And once you are dead, you're dead. Do not fear death. Just live every day like it should last. Treat people right. Do not go to bed angry. 10, whatever you start, you have to finish. Wow. That was wise. So a couple more paragraphs. I encourage you all to listen to your elders. Remember that not all elders are your elders, and that elders do not give up advice freely. To build a loving friendship with an elder is one of the best things you will ever do. Choose work where you will be able to work with elders. Learn from them and serve them. For one day, you will be one of them. And we are the link between the ancestors and the future generations. Be proud of all that you have accomplished and excited for the future. I'm incredibly proud to walk alongside you as a fellow alum and wish you all nothing but the very best. So the words from Bruffett. Ayomasi Dinyapa. And now, please welcome Dr. Iliyah Lowry, Kaplan Family Professor of American History for our
anyway, I thought about many things to try to add in the way of advice, but you know everything you need to know. I'm so grateful, Dr. Womack, for your instruction to trust yourself. I want to also say Mado, which is our Muskogee word for thank you, to Iliyah's mother, Christine, and to Sierra's mother. I'm so grateful for both of you, for the ways that you brought these women into the world. In times, knowing from my own experience as a mother, in times that are some of the darkest times, some of the most fearful times that we have. Are times when we're carrying our daughters and we don't know what kind of world we're bringing them into. We don't know what kind of mothers we're going to be. You know, I know that my daughter Iliyah was my first and last. She takes it all. And the times that I faced of my deepest fears were also my moments of deepest connection when she was in my womb. And I also am so deeply admiring of both of you for being here today. There's nothing special about Emory. You know, we as members of this university community want ourselves to feel like we belong. That's, I think, what draws us into an academic way of life, you know, is that separation that we feel from our fellow human beings. We want to rejoin, we want to be together, and we want to be together in that search for ideas. The place like Emory is only special because Iliyah and Sierra have made it so. Because our students continually renew this place. For me as a faculty member, so privileged to work with them, also to be at Emory for shorter periods of time than you all have. I've only been here for 2 years. It provides us with a continued sense of regeneration, renewal, but also hope and expectation for the future. And it's that hope and expectation that calms our fears. And so just thinking about the most afraid I've ever been was carrying my daughter. Possibly the next most afraid time will be when she graduates college. So the fact that you are both here, standing in courage alongside them, it just reminds me of what we've cited many Native writers today, and I'll add another one to the list, Louise Erdrich, who's an Ojibwe writer lives in Minneapolis. You know, she talked about Native women moving with dignity under the weight of all that tradition, so they won't collapse. You know, and that's resilience to me. Resilience is the combination of fear and courage that both of you evidence in your absolute every single daily existence. Here, we're so proud to think of you moving on to carry some little part of us maybe with you, but you know, as you move forward, as you leave it behind, think of those women that provided you with the combination of fear and courage that has made you stronger. And I think all the time about one of my earliest exposures to Muskogee oratory was the speech of a principal, Chief George Tiger, when he talked in Alabama about how through adversity we gain strength. And that adversity, that type of the special brand of fear and courage is what makes us resilient. And I just wanted to say a very special ode to your moms and to both. So, thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you, Beth, for organizing this incredible event. You know, again, we're so privileged to have you, Beth, as a leader, confidant, friend to our students, but also to every single other person in this room. You know. And then I also want to say ode to Zach Cole, who helped us gather in this space, to Mike Mortimer, who helped put so many different parts of the event together, and especially to Sierra and to Iliyah. So proud of you all. Thank you.